You're just a burden now, Rebecca." Those words hung in the air of our bedroom like a toxic cloud. I'd been home from the hospital for just 3 weeks after my spinal surgery, and my husband Tom stood at the foot of our bed, his expression a mix of frustration and something worse, pity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I felt my heart shatter in that moment, but 15 years of marriage had taught me how to hide my pain. I simply nodded, smiled tightly, and said, "I'm sorry you feel that way." But inside, something fundamentally changed. The woman who had entered Lakeside Memorial Hospital 6 weeks earlier wasn't the same one who lay in that bed, physically broken, but mentally awakening to a truth I'd been avoiding for years. My name is Rebecca Williams. 6 months ago, I was a successful interior designer, co-owner of Williams & Reed Design Studio, and wife to Thomas Williams, one of Lakeside Heights' most prominent real estate developers. We lived in a beautiful colonial home in Pinecrest Estates that I had personally designed and renovated over the years. We had the perfect life, at least on paper: the dinner parties, the vacations, the country club memberships, and the respect of everyone in our social circle. Then came the accident. A rainy Tuesday evening, a driver who ran a red light, and suddenly I was being rushed to Lakeside Memorial with a shattered vertebra and nerve damage that would require extensive surgery and months of rehabilitation. The doctors were clear from the beginning. Recovery would be long, painful, and there was no guarantee I'd ever return to full mobility. Tom seemed supportive at first. He visited the hospital daily, brought flowers, and spoke encouragingly about my recovery. But I should have noticed the signs: how he checked his watch constantly during visits, how his mind seemed elsewhere when the doctors explained my treatment plan, how he flinched slightly when Dr. Foster mentioned I'd need help at home for at least 6 months. The day I came home, something changed. Our house, the one I'd put my heart and soul into, suddenly felt foreign. Tom had moved my things from our master bedroom to the guest room downstairs, explaining that the stairs would be too difficult for me. Practical, yes, but he didn't ask me first. It was the beginning of a pattern. As the days passed, I watched my husband transform from my partner to my reluctant caretaker. The subtle sighs when I needed help bathing, the growing impatience when my pain medications made me foggy, the forced smiles when friends called to check on me. It was as if my injury had revealed a truth about our marriage that had been lurking beneath the surface all along. Then came that night, 3 weeks after I'd returned home. Tom had been on the phone for hours with his business partner, Rob. Something about a development deal in trouble. When he finally came to check on me before bed, I asked if everything was okay. "It's nothing for you to worry about," he said dismissively. "Just business." "I might be able to help," I offered. Before my accident, Tom and I had often discussed his business challenges. My design perspective had proven valuable on several occasions, helping him visualize projects in ways that appealed to clients. That's when he laughed. Not the warm laugh I'd fallen in love with, but something cold and foreign. "Rebecca, you can barely get to the bathroom without help. The best thing you can do is focus on getting better and not adding to my stress right now." I felt myself shrink into the pillows. "I'm still me, Tom. My brain works fine." He ran his hand through his hair, exasperation etched across his face. "Look, I'm juggling everything. The business, the house, the bills, and now your care. Rob suggested we bring in a nurse, and honestly, I'm considering it." "Is it that much of a burden to help your wife?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. That's when he said it, the words that would change everything. "You're just a burden now, Rebecca." He seemed shocked by his own admission, but he didn't take it back. Instead, he mumbled something about being tired and stressed, then left the room. I lay there in the dark, tears silently streaming down my face, my body aching but my heart hurting far worse. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I stared at the ceiling, replaying not just that conversation but our entire marriage. How had we arrived at this point? When had I become nothing more than an obligation to the man who had vowed to stand by me in sickness and in health? As the night deepened, so did my clarity. Our marriage had been faltering long before my accident. Tom's growing ambition had gradually pushed everything else aside, including me. I had been so busy creating the perfect home, the perfect image, that I'd missed the warning signs of emotional neglect. My accident hadn't created this problem. It had simply exposed it. By 3 a.m., I was fully awake and filled with a strange, calm resolve. Using the wheelchair beside my bed, I carefully maneuvered myself to the small desk in the corner of the guest room, where Tom had thoughtfully placed my laptop. "At least you can still work a little," he had said when setting it up, though we both knew my design work required physical presence at sites and showrooms. But that night, I wasn't interested in design projects. Instead, I opened our shared financial folder and began reviewing documents I hadn't looked at in years. Joint accounts, investments, property deeds, insurance policies, and most importantly, our estate plan, created 5 years earlier when things were still good between us. Tom and I had built significant wealth together. While his real estate development company formed the bulk of our assets, my design business had flourished in recent years, becoming sought after by Lakeside Heights elite. Our estate plan, created with the expectation of growing old together, left everything to each other, with secondary provisions for our siblings if we both passed. As I scrolled through the documents, something caught my eye, a clause about incapacitation that I had never fully understood. I made a note to myself to call Daniel Cooper, our family attorney, first thing in the morning. The next day, while Tom was at the office, I made the call. "Rebecca, how are you recovering?" Daniel's voice was warm with genuine concern. "Physically slow, mentally faster than ever," I replied. "I need your advice, Daniel, privately." There was a brief pause. "Of course. What can I help you with?" "Our estate plan. I need to understand my options." My voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Daniel cleared his throat. "I usually discuss these matters with both you and Tom present. I understand, but things have changed. I need to know where I stand legally before I decide my next steps." Perhaps it was something in my tone, or perhaps Daniel had always been more perceptive than I'd given him credit for, but he agreed to meet me the following day. "I can come to your home if that's easier given your condition," he offered. "No," I said firmly. "I'll come to your office." I hadn't left the house since returning from the hospital, but suddenly it seemed crucial to have this conversation away from the walls that felt increasingly like a beautiful prison. I hung up and immediately called my sister Jen. Unlike Tom, she answered on the first ring. "Hey sis, how are you feeling today?" Her voice instantly soothed my frayed nerves. "I need a favor," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Can you drive me to Daniel Cooper's office tomorrow at 2 p.m.? The lawyer? Is everything okay?" The concern in her voice was palpable. I hesitated, not ready to share Tom's words with anyone yet, even Jen. "I just need to review some paperwork while my mind is clear. These pain meds make it hard to focus sometimes." She didn't sound convinced, but she agreed. "Of course. I'll pick you up at 1:30. That night at dinner, which Tom had ordered from the waterfront grill, claiming he was too tired to cook, I watched my husband across the table. He looked exhausted, yes, but there was something else in his demeanor. Relief. He was relieved to be at the office all day, away from me, away from the reality of what our life had become. "I have an appointment tomorrow," I said casually, taking a small bite of salmon. Tom glanced up, surprised. With Dr. Foster? I thought your next checkup wasn't for 2 weeks. Not medical, legal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'm meeting with Daniel Cooper. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. What for? I maintained eye contact, keeping my voice level. Some questions about disability insurance and how it impacts our finances. Just being thorough. I could have handled that, he said, frowning. You're busy enough. I echoed his words back to him with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. It's the one thing I can take off your plate right now. He seemed to accept this, returning to his meal with a shrug. Who's driving you? Jen. He nodded, relief flickering across his face again. One less burden for him to bear. The next day, sitting across from Daniel in his downtown office, felt like stepping into another world. The hustle of legal assistants, the smell of coffee and paper, the sounds of a workplace in motion, it all seemed foreign after weeks confined to the quiet of our home. Daniel looked surprised at my appearance. I hadn't bothered with makeup, and my usually carefully styled blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. I wore comfortable clothes that accommodated my back brace, so different from the polished designer outfits I'd worn when we'd last met. Thank you for seeing me, Daniel, I said, as his assistant helped me settle into a chair across from his imposing desk. Of course, Rebecca. How can I help? I took a deep breath. I need to understand exactly what happens to our assets if I remain partially disabled. The current medical outlook is uncertain. Daniel nodded, pulling out our file. Your estate plan is fairly straightforward. In the event of death, everything passes to the surviving spouse. In the event of incapacitation, the spouse becomes power of attorney. And if we divorce? The word hung in the air between us. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly, but his professional demeanor remained intact. That would depend on several factors. Michigan is an equitable distribution state, meaning assets would be divided fairly, but not necessarily equally. Given the length of your marriage and your contributions to both the household and your joint finances through your design business, you would likely be entitled to a significant portion of your marital assets. Even if my future earning potential is compromised due to disability, that would actually strengthen your position, Daniel explained. The court would take your medical condition into consideration when determining support and asset division. I nodded, processing this information. What about Tom's business and mine? Both would be considered marital assets since they were built during your marriage, though there are complexities regarding valuation and division of business interests. For the next hour, Daniel patiently walked me through various scenarios. With each question I asked, my path forward became clearer. By the time our meeting concluded, I had a comprehensive understanding of my position. Rebecca, Daniel said as his assistant helped me back into the wheelchair. Is there something specific prompting these questions? Is Tom aware you're exploring these options? I met his gaze directly. Tom called me a burden, Daniel. After 15 years of building a life together, that's how he sees me now. I'm not making any hasty decisions, but I need to understand what my life might look like if this is truly who he's become. Daniel's expression softened with understanding. I see. Well, everything we've discussed is confidential. Take your time, consider your options carefully, and know that my door is always open. Jen was waiting in the reception area, scrolling through her phone. Her eyes widened when she saw my expression. That good, huh? She asked as she helped me into her car. Let's grab coffee, I suggested, not ready to return home yet. I could use some air that doesn't smell like surgical disinfectant or pity. At Morning Brew Cafe, settled at a corner table with steaming lattes before us, I finally told Jen everything. Tom's gradual withdrawal, his resentment, and finally, those cutting words that had changed everything. That bastard, Jen whispered, her knuckles white around her mug. After everything you've done for him, for your home, for his business image, you practically built his success with your connections and design vision. I hadn't thought about it that way, but she was right. Countless clients had come to Tom through my design network. The elegant model homes and sales offices that had become his signature look? All my work, often done at cost to support our future. "What are you going to do?" Jen asked. I took a sip of my latte, savoring the normalcy of the moment. "First, I'm going to protect myself. Tonight I'm changing our estate plan." "Can you do that without him knowing?" I nodded. "Daniel prepared the paperwork. As long as it's notarized, I can amend my portion. Tom would eventually find out when he updates his will, but that could be years." "And then?" I looked out the cafe window at the people passing by, living their normal lives. "Then I start rebuilding mine, with or without Tom." That night, after Tom had gone to sleep in our master bedroom upstairs, I pulled out the documents Daniel had given me. The amendments were simple but significant. Instead of leaving everything to Tom, my assets would now be divided between Jen and a trust established to help people recovering from spinal injuries. Tom would receive our home, the one thing I knew he valued more for its status than its memories. I signed the papers carefully, my hand surprisingly steady. Daniel had arranged for a mobile notary, a discreet older woman who arrived at 11 p.m. and asked no questions as she stamped and signed the documents. "Would you like me to mail these to Attorney Cooper's office?" she asked quietly. "Please," I replied, handing her the sealed envelope and the notary fee plus a generous tip. After she left, I sat in the dark guest room that had become my bedroom, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. The woman who had come home from the hospital was indeed gone, but in her place was someone stronger. Someone who understood that sometimes the heaviest burdens we carry aren't physical at all. The next morning at breakfast, Tom seemed unusually attentive, pouring my coffee and asking about my plans for physical therapy that day. "How was your meeting with Daniel yesterday?" he asked casually, spreading butter on his toast. "Informative," I replied, watching his face carefully. "He helped me understand our disability insurance options." Tom nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Good. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe we should look into that home healthcare service. It would give you professional help during the day while I'm at the office." Translation: it would relieve him of the burden of caring for his wife. "Actually," I said, taking a careful sip of coffee, "Olivia suggested something interesting yesterday when she called. She's converting her garden studio into a temporary living space for her mother, who's visiting for a few months. She offered it to me instead. Said it might be good for my recovery to have a change of scenery and someone around during the day since she works from home." This was a lie. I hadn't spoken to my best friend Olivia in days, though the part about her garden studio was true. Tom's expression was a fascinating mix of emotions: surprise, confusion, and unmistakable relief. "You'd want to do that? Leave home during your recovery?" I shrugged, wincing slightly at the pain the movement caused. "It might be easier for both of us. You wouldn't have to worry about me while you're dealing with the Burlington project, and I'd have company during the day." "I don't want you to think I can't take care of you," he said, but his protest sounded hollow even to his own ears. "It's not about that," I lied smoothly. "It's about giving us both some space during a difficult time. My injury has changed. Our dynamics, Tom. We might need distance to adjust." He reached across the table and took my hand, a gesture that would have warmed my heart just days ago. Now I noticed how he carefully avoided looking at my medication bottles lined up beside my plate. "If that's what you think is best," he said, relief evident in his voice. "When would you go?" "I'll call Olivia today and work out the details," I said, gently retrieving my hand from his. Probably by the end of the week. He nodded, already reaching for his phone, no doubt mentally rearranging his schedule now that the burden of my care would be lifted. After breakfast, I called Olivia. For real. Unlike Tom, she instantly understood what wasn't being said. "He called you a what?" she exclaimed when I finally confided in her. "Oh, honey, pack your bags. The studio is yours for as long as you need it." "Are you sure? Your mom?" "Can wait. She'll understand completely. Besides, the studio is perfect. For someone recovering, all on one level. That beautiful garden view. And I'm just across the yard if you need anything." Tears welled in my eyes, the first I'd allowed myself since that night. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you see what I'm going to do to help you rebuild your design business to accommodate your new circumstances. I've already got ideas for virtual consultations, a team approach where you direct junior designers for the physical site visits." And just like that, through the fog of pain medication and emotional trauma, I glimpsed a future I hadn't allowed myself to imagine yet, one where my value wasn't diminished by my physical limitations. 3 days later, Jen and Olivia helped me move into the garden studio. Tom carried in my suitcases, looking around approvingly at the beautifully designed space. Of course, Olivia had been one of my first clients when I started my business. "This is nice," he said, setting down my bags. "Very accessible." I watched him taking in the subtle modifications Olivia had already made, the raised bed for easier transfers, the spacious bathroom with grab bars, the desk adjusted to accommodate a wheelchair. "Yes," I agreed. "Olivia understands what I need right now." His face flushed slightly at the implied criticism. "Rebecca, It's fine, Tom," I interrupted gently. "This is better for both of us." He nodded, looking relieved again. That expression I was coming to recognize so well. "I should get going. Big meeting with the investors for the Burlington project. Call if you need anything?" "I will," I promised, knowing I wouldn't. After a quick, awkward hug, he was gone. Jen and Olivia exchanged glances, but said nothing as they helped me unpack. That evening, alone in the garden studio with the setting sun casting warm light across the bamboo floors, I opened my laptop and did something I hadn't done since before the accident. I logged into my company email. Hundreds of messages awaited. Me, clients concerned about my absence, employees handling projects in my stead, industry contacts sending well wishes. But the message that caught my eye was from Vanessa Reed, my business partner. "Rebecca, when you're ready, no pressure, completely your timeline. I have some ideas about how we can restructure your role to accommodate your recovery." The Madison. Project clients specifically asked for you despite knowing about your accident. They're willing to work virtually. Let me know when you want to discuss. Miss you around here. V. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flutter of excitement. I might be different now, changed by both physical trauma and emotional revelation, but I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. I began typing a response to Vanessa, outlining ideas that had been forming in my mind during those long, painful hours in the guest bedroom of what used to be my home. As my fingers moved across the keyboard, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before the accident. Purpose. Tom had called me a burden, and in doing so, he had inadvertently set me free. By changing our estate plan that night, I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. It wouldn't be the same life. It couldn't be. But as I sat in that garden studio surrounded by beauty and possibility, I realized it might be something even better. A life defined by my own terms, not by the limitations others placed upon me. 2 weeks into my stay at Olivia's garden studio, I developed a rhythm to my days. Mornings were for physical therapy with Maria, an enthusiastic therapist who pushed me just enough without risking setbacks. Afternoons were split between rest and reconnecting with my design business through video calls. Evenings were mine. Time to reflect, plan, and gradually rebuild my sense of self. Tom called daily at first, his voice carrying that strange mix of obligation and relief. Our conversations were brief, focused on logistics and polite inquiries about each other's days. Neither of us mentioned his words or my abrupt departure from our home. It hung between us, an unacknowledged chasm widening with each passing day. By the third week, his calls became less frequent, every other day, then twice a week. I told myself I didn't mind. In truth, each missed call was both a wound and a confirmation. The man I'd married was showing me exactly who he was, and I was finally paying attention. On a rain-soaked Tuesday evening, I sat at the custom desk Olivia had adjusted for my wheelchair, reviewing emails when my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel Cooper. Changes processed. Documents filed. Call when convenient. My heart raced. The estate plan amendments were official. I had legally redirected my assets away from Tom, the first concrete step toward whatever came next. I texted back a simple, "Thank you," and set my phone aside, unsure whether the trembling in my hands came from excitement or fear. Olivia knocked gently on the studio door before entering with 2 glasses of wine. She'd developed an uncanny ability to sense when I needed company. "Good day or bad day?" she asked, setting the glasses on the coffee table. "Complicated day," I replied, wheeling myself over to join her on the sofa. With practiced movements, I transferred from the chair to the cushions, wincing only slightly at the twinge in my lower back. "The changes to my estate plan are official." Olivia raised her glass. "To taking back control." We clinked glasses, and I took a sip of the rich Cabernet. "He hasn't even asked about the documents, Liv. 3 weeks I've been gone, and Tom hasn't once mentioned our financial arrangements, our businesses, nothing." "Because he assumes nothing has changed," Olivia said, her voice gentle but firm. "Men like Tom never see the storm coming until they're drowning in it." I laughed despite myself. "That's oddly poetic for you." "I have hidden depths," she quipped, before her expression turned serious. "Have you thought about what comes next? I mean, beyond recovery and work. With Tom." I stared into my wine glass, watching the dark liquid catch the light. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to confront him, make him understand how deeply his words cut. Another part wants to simply fade away from his life, building something new without the drama of explanations or accusations. And which part is winning? I sighed, leaning back carefully against the cushions. Neither. Both. I keep thinking about something my grandmother used to say. Never make permanent decisions from temporary emotions. Wise woman? Olivia nodded. Though I'd argue being called a burden by your husband might warrant some permanent decisions. It's not just what he said, I admitted. It's realizing what it revealed about our entire marriage. How conditional his love was. How much of myself I'd compromised to maintain the perfect image. How easily I became dispensable when I wasn't actively contributing to his definition of success. Olivia reached over and squeezed my hand. For what it's worth, I always thought, you were too good for him. You never said anything. Would you have listened? She asked with a knowing smile. Probably not, I conceded. I was too busy being the perfect wife, the perfect designer, the perfect everything. It's exhausting looking back on it. So what now? I took another sip of wine, savoring the complexity of flavors. Now I focus on healing, physically and emotionally. I rebuild my business in a way that accommodates my new reality, and I gather information. Information? Olivia raised an eyebrow. About our finances, our business entanglements, everything. Before I make any decisions about our marriage, I need to understand exactly where I stand. Smart, she nodded. And how will you do that without tipping Tom off? I smiled, feeling a spark of my old confidence. You remember Vanessa, my business partner? Her husband is a financial analyst. He's agreed to look over everything, completely confidentially. Look at you, plotting like a chess master. Olivia grinned. Not plotting, I corrected. Preparing. The next morning, I woke to a text from Tom. Coming by around 6 tonight, need to discuss something important. My stomach tightened. Had he somehow discovered the changes to the estate plan? Was this the confrontation I'd been simultaneously dreading and preparing for? I texted back a simple, okay, and tried to focus on my morning routine, but anxiety thrummed beneath every action. During physical therapy, Maria noticed my distraction. You're holding tension in your shoulders, she observed, gently adjusting my position during a stretch. Something on your mind? I hesitated, then decided a partial truth was better than none. My husband is coming by tonight. It's the first time we'll really talk since I moved here. Maria nodded, her expression neutral but kind. Remember your breathing exercises. Stress tightens the muscles, which can aggravate your injury. I'll try, I promised, grateful for her practical advice. After therapy, I called Jen, needing my sister's steady perspective. Want me to be there? She offered immediately. I can sit in the main house with Olivia, close enough if you need backup, but not hovering. No, I decided after a moment's consideration. I need to handle this myself. But maybe stay by your phone? Always, she promised. The hours crawled by. I found myself fussing with my appearance in a way I hadn't since the accident, swapping my comfortable therapy clothes for a casual but flattering outfit, applying light makeup, even asking Olivia to help me style my hair. I told myself it was about reclaiming my identity, not impressing Tom, but the distinction felt blurry even to me. At precisely 6 p.m., I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. Olivia squeezed my shoulder before disappearing to the main house, leaving me alone in the studio to face whatever was coming. Tom knocked tentatively, so unlike his usual confident rap. Rebecca, it's me. Come in, I called, positioning my wheelchair near the sofa rather than behind the desk. No physical barriers between us. I wanted to read his every expression. He entered hesitantly, his tall frame seeming somehow diminished in the doorway. I was struck by how unfamiliar he looked, this man I'd shared 15 years with. Had he changed? Or had my perception of him transformed so completely? You look good, he said, his eyes taking in my appearance with something like surprise. Better than before. Thank you, I replied, gesturing to the armchair across from me. Please sit. He settled into the chair, placing a slim leather portfolio on his lap. Work documents, I assumed. Always business with Tom. How are you feeling? He asked, his tone careful, measured. Better every day, I answered truthfully. The pain is manageable now, and I'm making progress in therapy. Dr. Foster is optimistic about partial recovery, though I'll likely always have some limitations. Tom nodded, his fingers drumming nervously on the portfolio. That's good to hear. And how is it here? With Olivia? It's been exactly what I needed, I said, watching his reaction closely. The space is perfect for someone in my condition, and having company during the day helps more than I expected. He glanced around the studio, taking in the adaptations Olivia had made, the adjusted countertops, the accessible shower, the carefully arranged furniture that accommodated a wheelchair while still looking stylish. She's done a nice job with the place. She had a good designer as a friend, I replied with a small smile. A hint of the old Tom emerged as he chuckled. Always modest. The moment of warmth faded quickly, replaced by an awkward silence. Waited, letting him shoulder the burden of breaking it. Finally, he cleared his throat. I wanted to talk to you about something important. 2 things, actually. I nodded, bracing myself. Go ahead. He opened the portfolio and withdrew several documents. First, the Burlington project is moving forward. The investors are on board, and we're breaking ground next month. Congratulations, I said automatically, wondering why he'd come in person to share business news. Thank you, he replied, his posture straightening with pride. It's a big deal for the company. My biggest development yet. I noticed his choice of words. My biggest development, not our biggest. Perhaps it had always been this way, and I simply hadn't been listening closely enough. The thing is, he continued, shuffling the papers, part of the investment agreement involves some restructuring of our assets. The lawyers suggested I discuss it with you, given our current situation. And there it was. Not concern for my well-being, not a desire to repair our relationship, but business. Always business. What kind of restructuring? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He handed me a document. Basically, we need to temporarily move some assets into separate accounts to satisfy the liability requirements of the investors. It's purely a technical change. Everything would still be jointly owned, just structured differently on paper. I scanned the document, years of reviewing contracts for my own business making the legalese relatively clear. What Tom was proposing would effectively give him sole control over our liquid assets for the duration of the Burlington project, potentially years. And the second thing? I asked, setting the document aside without comment. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Foster called me yesterday. She wanted to discuss your long-term care options. My spine stiffened. She had no right to call you without my permission. You're still my wife, Rebecca, he said, a hint of the old authority returning to his voice. Legally, she was right to keep me informed. I took a deep breath, remembering Maria's advice about stress and tension. What did she say? That you're progressing well, but will need ongoing therapy and possibly some permanent accommodations at home. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I've been thinking about it, and I believe it makes sense for you to come home. We can convert the den into a bedroom, install whatever equipment you need. It would be better than imposing on Olivia, indefinitely. I studied his face, searching for the real motivation behind this sudden concern. Was it genuine care, or was it connected to the financial restructuring he needed my signature for? That's thoughtful, I said carefully. But I'm not ready to make that decision yet. I'm comfortable here, and my recovery is progressing well in this environment. Disappointment flickered across his features, quickly masked. Of course, it was just a suggestion. I gestured toward the financial documents. Regarding the Burlington project, I'd like my own attorney to review these before I sign anything. Now genuine surprise registered on his face. Your attorney? You mean Daniel? Daniel represents us both, I pointed out. I've been consulting with Marjorie Winters for my personal matters. This was a lie. I'd never met Marjorie Winters, though I knew her by reputation as one of the toughest divorce attorneys in Lakeside Heights. The name drop was calculated, a test to see how Tom would react. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. When did you retain Marjorie Winters? Recently, I said vaguely. Given my condition, it seemed prudent to have personal representation for healthcare and financial decisions. Tom's jaw tightened. Rebecca, if you're concerned about the Burlington documents, I can have my team explain. It's not about understanding them, I interrupted gently. It's about protecting my interests while I'm in a vulnerable position. Surely you can appreciate that. A flash of something, guilt, frustration, crossed his face before he nodded stiffly. Of course. How long do you think the review will take? I'll try to expedite it, I promised, though I had no intention of signing regardless of what any attorney might say. Now, was there anything else? Tom hesitated, clearly thrown off by this new, assertive version of his wife. Just The house feels empty without you. The words should have touched me. Weeks ago, they would have. Now, I wondered if the house felt empty, or if his ego felt bruised by my absence. I miss aspects of home, I admitted, choosing my words with care. But this arrangement is working for now. He nodded, gathering his documents with slightly less confidence than he'd entered with. Well, let me know about those papers as soon as possible. The investors are pushing for closure. I will, I promised, watching as he stood to leave. At the door, he paused, turning back with an expression I couldn't quite read. Rebecca, about what I said that night. I was stressed and overwhelmed. I didn't mean it. I held his gaze steadily. Which part didn't you mean, Tom? Calling me a burden or revealing how you truly feel? He flinched as if I'd struck him. That's not fair. Perhaps not, I conceded. But it is honest. Something we haven't been with each other for a long time, I think. He opened his mouth as if to argue, then seemed to think better of it. With a curt nod, he left, the door closing softly behind him. I sat motionless in my wheelchair, listening to his car start and the crunch of gravel as he drove away. Only then did I allow myself to tremble, the force of contained emotions finally breaking through. Olivia appeared within minutes, as if she'd been hovering just out of sight. You okay? I saw him leave looking like someone had punched him in the gut. A laugh escaped me, half sob and half triumph. He wanted me to sign documents giving him control of our assets for the Burlington project. Oh, and he generously offered to let me come home, where he could safely secure both my signature and my compliance. Olivia's eyebrows shot up. Wow, subtle. He's never had to be subtle before, I pointed out. I always went along with whatever he wanted. And now? I wheeled myself to the desk, powered up my laptop, and opened my email. Now I contact Vanessa's husband and ask him to analyze exactly what Tom's trying to do with our finances. And then I called Daniel Cooper to discuss what legal protections I might need beyond the estate plan changes. Olivia watched me with a mixture of admiration and concern. What about Marjorie Winters? I thought you made her up to rattle him. I did, I admitted. But maybe it's time to make that fiction a reality. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt since before the accident. The fog of pain medication, emotional trauma, and uncertainty had lifted, revealing a path forward. It wouldn't be easy, but few worthwhile journeys are. I began my day by calling Daniel Cooper, arranging a meeting for the following afternoon. Next, I emailed Marcus Reed, Vanessa's husband, attaching the documents Tom had left with me. Then I made the call I'd been contemplating since Tom's visit. Winter's Legal Group, answered a crisp, professional voice. I'd like to schedule a consultation with Marjorie Winters, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Regarding a potential divorce with complex financial considerations. The receptionist didn't miss a beat. Ms. Winters has an opening next Tuesday at 2 p.m. May I have your name? Rebecca Williams. As I spoke my name, I realized it might not be mine for much longer. The thought brought a confused mixture of sadness and liberation. After scheduling the appointment, I wheeled myself to the bathroom and studied my reflection. In the mirror. The woman looking back at me was thinner than before the accident, with new lines of pain etched around her eyes and mouth. But there was something else, too. A determination. A fire that had either been absent before, or that I had been too blind to see. Hello, Rebecca, I whispered to my reflection. Time to reintroduce ourselves. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Any update on the documents? Investors meeting Friday. I set the phone aside without responding. Let him wait. For 15 years, I had prioritized his needs, his timelines, his success. Now it was my turn. Olivia knocked and entered with coffee. Morning, warrior woman. Sleep okay? I smiled at the nickname. Better than I have in weeks. I made some calls. She settled into the armchair, eyes widening as I detailed my morning's activities. Wow, no hesitation, huh? None, I confirmed. Tom's visit was clarifying. He hasn't changed. I have. What exactly are you hoping to achieve? She asked, passing me a steaming mug. Full divorce? Settlement? Reconciliation on new terms? I considered the question, warming my hands on the ceramic. I honestly don't know yet. What I do know is that I need to understand exactly where I stand, legally, financially, emotionally, before I make any permanent decisions. Smart approach, Olivia nodded. Though from where I'm sitting, that marriage is deader than last season's color palette. I laughed despite myself. Always the tactful one. You don't pay me for tact, she grinned. You pay me for honesty. I don't pay you at all, I pointed out. You're housing me out of the goodness of your heart. Her expression softened. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Seeing you come back to yourself these past few weeks has been... well, it's been inspiring, Beck. I was saved from a tearful response by the chime of my laptop, an email from Marcus Reed. That was fast. I wheeled over to the desk and opened. The message, Olivia peering over my shoulder. Rebecca, it began. I've reviewed the documents Tom asked you to sign. In short, don't. The restructuring he's proposing would effectively remove your access to approximately 65% of your liquid assets for the duration of the Burlington project, estimated at 3 to 5 years. More concerning, there's a clause on page 4 that would make it extremely difficult for you to contest any financial decisions he makes during this period. I've attached a more detailed analysis, but my professional recommendation is to reject these terms entirely. If you'd like to discuss alternatives that would protect your interests while still supporting the project, I'm happy to consult further. Marcus. Olivia whistled low. Well, that confirms it. He's trying to lock you out. I stared at the screen, a strange calm settling over me. He's scared. Of what? Of me, I realized. Of what I might do now that I'm no longer playing by his rules. I printed the email and Marcus's detailed analysis, adding them to a growing file of documents I was collecting. Financial records, medical reports, business valuations, and now, evidence of Tom's attempt to seize control of our assets. That afternoon, during my video call with Vanessa to discuss our design business, I found myself more engaged and innovative than I had been since before the accident. We brainstormed a new business model, one where I could leverage my design, expertise without requiring the physical presence that my injury might permanently limit. What if we restructured the consultancy into tiers? I suggested. I handle initial client meetings virtually, develop the concept and vision, and our junior designers handle the on-site implementation under my remote direction. Vanessa's eyes lit up. That could work brilliantly. Clients still get your expertise, we utilize our team more effectively, and you can work within your physical limitations. Plus, I added, warming to the idea, we could expand our geographic reach. Without being limited to sites I can physically visit, we could take clients across the country, maybe even internationally. By the end of the call, we had a tentative business plan, with Vanessa promising to draft formal proposals for us to review the following week. As I ended the call, I realized I was smiling, really smiling, for the first time in months. Jen arrived that evening with dinner from my favorite Italian restaurant. As we ate, I filled her in on the developments of the past 2 days. So, let me get this straight, she said, twirling pasta around her fork. Tom tried to trick you into signing away control of your money, which backfired spectacularly and instead convinced you to meet with a divorce attorney. Essentially, I nodded, taking a sip of sparkling water. Though I'm still not certain divorce is the answer, I just need to understand all my options. Jen studied me over the rim of her wine glass. Can I ask you something personal? Has that ever stopped you before? I teased. She smiled briefly before her expression turned serious. Do you still love him? After everything? The question hit me with unexpected force. Did I still love Tom? The man I thought I married, certainly. But that man had revealed himself to be a fiction, a character I had constructed from selective attention and willing blindness. I love who I thought he was, I said slowly. But that person doesn't exist. Maybe he never did. Jen nodded, understanding in her eyes. And the real Tom? The one who called his injured wife a burden? I set down my fork, appetite suddenly diminished. That Tom. I don't think I can ever look at him the same way again. His words shattered something fundamental between us. But even worse was realizing those words didn't come from nowhere. They revealed a truth he'd been hiding for years. That he's a selfish ass? Jen suggested helpfully. I laughed despite the heaviness of the conversation. That his commitment was conditional. That I was valuable to him as long as I was contributing to his definition of success. That 15 years of marriage wasn't enough to sustain his care when things got difficult. You deserve better, Jen said firmly. You always have. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you for being here through all of this. Where else would I be? She asked simply. After Jen left, I sat in the quiet studio, laptop open before me. On impulse, I navigated to our joint photo albums stored in the cloud, pictures from 15 years of marriage, vacations, business events, family gatherings. I scrolled through them slowly, studying Tom's face, my face, our body language in each image. What I saw disturbed me. In photo after photo, I was turned toward Tom, smiling up at him, while his attention was elsewhere. On the camera, on other people, on his phone. Even in our wedding photos, there was a subtle distance in his eyes, a reservation I had completely missed at the time, too caught up in the fairy tale I thought we were living. I closed the laptop, a heaviness settling in my chest. The evidence had been there all along. I simply hadn't wanted to see it. That night, I dreamed of our house. The beautiful colonial and Pinecrest estates that I had lovingly designed and decorated. In the dream, I moved freely, without pain or wheelchair, walking from room to room, but with each doorway I passed through, the rooms behind me vanished, until I stood in an empty shell of a house, my carefully chosen furnishings and personal touches erased as if they had never existed. I woke in the pre-dawn darkness, heart racing, the dream still vivid. It didn't take a therapist to interpret its meaning. I was letting go. Of the house, of the marriage, of the version of myself that had been defined by being Tom's wife. The realization brought not grief, as I might have expected, but a profound sense of possibility. For the first time since Tom had uttered those devastating words, I felt genuinely excited about the future, not just resigned to it, not just determined to survive it, but eager to discover what it might hold. I reached for my phone and composed a text to Tom. I've reviewed the Burlington documents with my financial advisor. I won't be signing them as presented. I'm open to discussing alternatives that protect both our interests. Also, I'll need access to the house next week to collect some personal items. Please let me know a time that works for you. I pressed send, then set the phone aside and picked up the notebook where I'd been jotting ideas for my business restructuring. By the time Maria arrived for physical therapy at 9 a.m., I had 3 pages of notes and a renewed sense of purpose. Someone's energetic this morning, Maria observed as she helped me through my stretching routine. I had a revelation overnight, I told her. I've been so focused on what I've lost that I haven't fully appreciated what I might gain. Maria smiled knowingly. That's usually when the real healing begins. The day of my appointment with Daniel, Cooper arrived with a clarity that seemed almost symbolic, bright sunshine after a week of rain. Jen picked me up from Olivia's, her car now equipped with a portable ramp that made transferring from my wheelchair significantly easier. Nervous? she asked as we merged onto the highway toward downtown Lakeside Heights. Oddly, no, I replied, watching the familiar scenery pass by my window. More. Resolved. In truth, the past week had brought a strange sense of calm. Tom had responded to my text about the Burlington documents with uncharacteristic restraint, simply acknowledging that we would need to discuss alternatives. He'd also agreed to my request to visit the house, suggesting the following Monday when he would be at the office, another telling detail in our unraveling relationship. Daniel's office looked exactly as it had during my last visit, but my perception of it had shifted completely. What once seemed intimidating now felt like a sanctuary of order and procedure, a place where emotional chaos could be translated into actionable plans. "Rebecca," Daniel greeted me warmly, coming around his desk to shake my hand. "You're looking well." "Thank you," I said, wheeling myself to my preferred position near his desk. "I'm feeling stronger every day." He nodded appreciatively, then turned to the matter at hand with the efficiency I'd always valued in him. "I've reviewed all the documents you sent over, the estate plan amendments, the Burlington project proposal, and your current financial statements. I've also looked into the questions you raised about your design business." I nodded, grateful for his thoroughness. "And your thoughts?" "Legally speaking, you're in a stronger position than you might think," he began, pulling out several folders. "Michigan's equitable distribution laws favor you given the length of your marriage and your contributions to both household and business assets. The timing of your injury actually strengthens your case for support should you decide to pursue divorce." The word still sent a small shock through me, despite my meetings with Marjorie Winters. Divorce. The end of 15 years. The beginning of something unknown. "What about Tom's attempt to restructure our assets for the Burlington project?" I asked, pushing personal feelings aside to focus on the practical. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. "Frankly, it's concerning. While there are legitimate business reasons to restructure assets for major development projects, the specific terms he proposed would have left you vulnerable. It's possible he was simply following bad legal advice, but you don't believe that," I finished for him. He met my gaze directly. "No, I don't. The proposal was too carefully crafted to restrict your access without appearing to do so. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." I absorbed this confirmation of what I already suspected. Tom's actions weren't impulsive or thoughtless, but calculated. The knowledge should have hurt more than it did. Perhaps I was finally building immunity to disappointment. "What about my business?" I asked, shifting to a topic where I felt more in control. "Williams and Reed Design Studio?" Daniel opened another folder. "Your partnership agreement with Vanessa Reed is quite solid. You each own 50% of the business, with clear provisions for disability or incapacitation. As long as you remain actively involved in some capacity, Tom has no claim on your share of the business, regardless of your marital status." Relief washed through me. My business had always been my own creation, separate from Tom's development company, though we had often collaborated professionally. Knowing it remained firmly under my control was deeply reassuring. "Now," Daniel continued, "regarding next steps. Based on our conversations and your recent consulting with Marjorie Winters, I understand you're considering divorce but haven't made a final decision. Is that correct?" I nodded, choosing my words carefully. "I'm preparing for that possibility, while exploring whether there's anything worth salvaging." Daniel's expression remained neutral, professional. "A prudent approach. In that case, I recommend we take several protective measures immediately, regardless of your ultimate decision." For the next hour, we discussed financial safeguards, business protections, and preliminary divorce considerations. By the time our meeting concluded, I had a clear action plan, a series of steps to secure my assets and future regardless of what happened with Tom. As Jen drove me back to Olivia's, I felt lighter somehow, as if uncertainty had been a physical weight I'd been carrying. "That went well," she observed, glancing over at me. "Better than expected," I agreed. "Daniel thinks I should meet with Tom in a neutral setting, with legal representation present, to discuss the Burlington project and our larger financial situation." Jen raised an eyebrow. "Sounds serious." "It is," I acknowledged, "but necessary. Before I make any permanent decisions about our marriage, I need clarity about our entangled finances." "And when will this meeting happen?" "Daniel's reaching out to Tom's attorney today to schedule something for next week." I turned to look out the window, watching as we passed the turnoff that would have led to my former home. "Before that, I need to visit the house and gather some personal items." "Want me to come?" "With you for that?" Jen offered. I considered her offer. Having support would make the emotional aspect easier, but something in me needed to face our home alone. "Thanks, but I think I need to do that part myself." She nodded, understanding without needing explanation. One of the many reasons I treasured our relationship. Back at Olivia's garden studio, I immersed myself in work, reviewing design proposals and client communications for the restructuring plan Vanessa and I had developed. The business focus helped quiet the emotional turbulence of the day's legal discussions. Just before dinner, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Rebecca Williams," I answered professionally. "Mrs. Williams, this is Grace Chen from Lakeside Memorial Hospital. Dr. Foster asked me to call about scheduling your next evaluation." We set a date for the following week, and I was about to end the call when Grace added, "Dr. Foster also mentioned that she spoke with your husband recently about your home care options. She wanted me to let you know that she's happy to discuss this with both of you at your next appointment if you'd like." A flash of irritation shot through me. "Thank you, Grace, but that won't be necessary. Dr. Foster should know that any discussions about my care should be with me directly, not my husband." There was a brief, awkward pause before Grace replied, "Of course, Mrs. Williams. I'll make a note in your file." After ending the call, I sat fuming at the presumption. It was yet another reminder of how easily Tom inserted himself into decisions about my life, my body, my future, and how readily others accepted his authority without questioning mine. Monday arrived with a strange sense of unreality. Today, I would return to the house I had lovingly created, not as its mistress but as a visitor collecting belongings. Olivia had offered to drive me, but like my visit to the house, this felt like something I needed to do independently. I called a wheelchair-accessible ride service instead. As we turned onto Pinecrest Drive, my heart began to race. The familiar street looked exactly as it always had. Manicured lawns, stately homes, seasonal wreaths adorning front doors. My driver pulled into our circular driveway, and for a moment, I simply sat staring at the colonial facade I had designed renovations for just 3 years earlier. "Would you like me to wait, ma'am?" the driver asked gently. I shook my head. "No, thank you. I'll call when I'm ready to leave." With practiced movements, I transferred to my wheelchair and made my way up the custom ramp Tom had installed during my brief return home after the hospital. The irony wasn't lost on me. Accommodations made for a wife he couldn't wait to be rid of. I still had my keys, though using them felt strangely invasive now, as if I were the intruder rather than the homeowner. The house was silent as I entered. The familiar scent of lemon furniture polish and the faint undertone of the fireplace we used on winter evenings wrapping around me like a bittersweet memory. I wheeled myself through the foyer into the open-concept living area I had designed to maximize natural light. Everything was immaculate. Tom must have hired a cleaning service after I left. The thought brought an unexpected surge of emotion. Had he erased all traces of my presence so easily? Moving through the house felt like visiting a museum of my former life. Here was the kitchen where I'd hosted countless dinner parties, the sunroom where I used to sketch design concepts on Sunday mornings, the living room where Tom and I had once curled up to watch movies on rainy evenings. I made my way to the guest bedroom that had briefly been mine after the accident. Tom had cleared it completely, no sign of the hospital bed, the medications, the evidence of illness and dependence that had so repelled him. Following my planning list, I began collecting the items I had come for: personal documents from the home office, family heirlooms, the jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother, photographs and mementos that couldn't be replaced. I worked methodically, checking off each item on my phone, trying to maintain emotional distance. In the master bedroom, I paused. This room, with its carefully selected furnishings and color palette, had been our private sanctuary for years. Now it felt like trespassing in a stranger's space. Tom's belongings were arranged with the precise orderliness he had always maintained, while the spaces where my things had once resided gaped empty. I opened my closet to find most of my clothes still hanging neatly: designer dresses, business, attire, casual wear, all selected with care over the years. I had brought only the essentials to Olivia's. Now I realized I didn't want most of these garments. They belonged to a version of Rebecca that no longer existed. I selected a few favorite pieces, then opened my jewelry box. The valuable items were there, but something was missing. I frowned, trying to identify what felt wrong, when it hit me. My mother's pearl earrings, a wedding gift from Tom, were gone. Cold spread through my chest. Those earrings held profound sentimental value, and Tom knew it. Had he taken them? Sold them? Given them away? Or was there an innocent explanation? I tried to remember if I had moved them before the accident, but came up blank. With shaking hands, I continued my inventory, discovering other small but meaningful absences. A silver frame that had held our wedding photo, a rare first-edition book from my collection, the antique letter opener that had been a gift from a design client. Each missing item felt like a small betrayal, a deliberate erasure. I completed my list, noting each missing piece with clinical detachment that belied my inner turmoil. As I finished in the bedroom, I heard the distinctive sound of the garage, door opening, Tom's car. He wasn't supposed to be here. He had explicitly said he would be at the office all day. My heart raced as I heard keys in the door, followed by footsteps in the foyer. "Hello? Is someone here?" Tom's voice called out. "It's me," I replied, wheeling myself toward the hallway. "I'm collecting some personal items, as we discussed." Tom appeared at the end of the hall, surprise evident on his face. "Rebecca, I thought you'd come earlier." "The appointment ran long," I explained, studying him carefully. He looked tired, his normally immaculate appearance slightly rumpled. "You said you'd be at the office all day." He shrugged, moving past me toward the kitchen. Meeting ended. "Early. Want some coffee?" The casual offer, as if this were any normal day in our marriage, threw me momentarily. "No, thank you. I'm almost finished here." I followed him to the kitchen, watching as he moved through the familiar routine of making coffee. Had he come home deliberately, knowing I would be here? Or was it genuinely coincidence? "Find everything you needed?" he asked, not quite meeting my eyes. "Almost," I replied carefully. Some items seemed to be missing. My mother's pearl earrings, for instance. His hands paused minutely in their task before resuming. "Missing? Are you sure? Maybe they're in your jewelry box at the studio." "They're not," I said firmly. "They were in my jewelry box here, along with several other items that I can't locate." Tom turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "If you make a list, I can look for them." "I'd appreciate that," I said, deciding to let the matter rest for now. Something in his demeanor had changed, a subtle tension that hadn't been there moments before. He leaned against the counter, coffee forgotten. "Daniel Cooper called my attorney about scheduling a meeting." So we were getting straight to business. Yes, I asked him to arrange it. "A meeting with lawyers present," Tom said, his tone hardening slightly. Is that really necessary, Rebecca? We can't discuss our finances like reasonable adults? I met his gaze directly. Recent events suggest otherwise. The Burlington documents you asked me to sign weren't what you represented them to be. A flash of something, anger, guilt, crossed his face before he controlled it. It was a standard business restructuring. If you had concerns, you could have discussed them with me directly instead of involving attorneys. Like you discussed, my long-term care with Dr. Foster without involving me, I countered, surprised by my own boldness. Tom had the grace to look slightly abashed. That was different. I was trying to help. Were you? I asked quietly. Or were you trying to regain control? The question hung between us, sharp and unavoidable. Tom set down his coffee mug with deliberate care. Is that what you think? That I'm trying to control you? I think, I said carefully, that our marriage has operated on certain assumptions for 15 years. Now that those assumptions have been challenged by my accident, we're both struggling to find solid ground. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I knew well. What exactly are you saying, Rebecca? I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. I'm saying that when you called me a burden that night, you revealed a truth about how you see me, as an accessory to your life, valuable only when I'm contributing in ways you deem worthwhile. That's not fair, he protested. But there was a defensive note in his voice that told me I'd hit close to home. I said something terrible in a moment of stress. Everyone says things they don't mean sometimes. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But your actions since then have only confirmed what your words revealed. The financial maneuvers, the discussions, with my doctor behind my back, the subtle pressure to return home where I would be dependent on you again. Tom's expression hardened. So you're punishing me for one comment made in a moment of weakness? Throwing away 15 years of marriage? No, I said quietly. I'm recognizing that those 15 years weren't what I thought they were. He stared at me, seeming genuinely bewildered. What does that even mean? We built a good life together. Rebecca. A beautiful home, successful businesses, respect in the community. What more did you want? The question struck me as so profoundly missing the point that I almost laughed. I wanted a partner, Tom. Someone who valued me for who I am, not what I contribute to your image or success. Someone who would stand by me when things got difficult. I am standing by you, he insisted, gesturing around the kitchen. The house is here waiting for you. I've been handling everything while you're gone. I've respected your need for space. I shook my head, sadness washing over me. You still don't understand. It's not about the house or managing practical matters. It's about seeing me as a whole person, not a burden when I'm injured or an asset when I'm useful. Tom's face flushed with anger. So that's it? One thoughtless comment and you're ready to throw everything away? What about forgiveness, Rebecca? What about the vows we took? What about in sickness and in health? I countered quietly. The directness of the question seemed to knock the wind from his sails. He leaned heavily against the counter, suddenly looking every day of his 45 years. I'm trying, he said, his voice lower. This hasn't been easy for me either. I know, I acknowledged, and I meant it. Despite everything, I could recognize that Tom was struggling with his own version of loss and adjustment. That's why I think we need the meeting with lawyers present, not to escalate conflict, but to establish clarity. We both need to understand exactly where we stand financially before we can make any decisions about our personal relationship. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me as if seeing me for the first time. You've changed, he finally said. Yes, I agreed simply. Near-death experiences and betrayal tend to do that to a person. He flinched at the word betrayal, but didn't deny it. When is this meeting supposed to happen? Daniel suggested Thursday at 2 p.m. Does that work with your schedule? Tom nodded stiffly. I'll make it work. An awkward silence fell between us. 15 years of shared history suddenly insufficient to bridge the chasm of misunderstanding and hurt. I should finish gathering my things, I said, breaking the tension. I've called a ride service to pick me up in about 30 minutes. I can drive you back to Olivia's, Tom offered, almost tentatively. I shook my head. Thank you, but I've made arrangements. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, another small control denied. As you wish. I turned my wheelchair to leave the kitchen, then paused. Tom, about the missing items. I'd really like my mother's earrings back. The rest doesn't matter as much. Something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, evasion. I couldn't be sure. I'll look for them, he promised. I nodded, not entirely convinced, and returned to my task of collecting personal items. Tom remained in the kitchen, giving me space to move through the house without his watchful presence. Whether this was respect or avoidance, I couldn't tell, but I appreciated it nonetheless. By the time my ride arrived, I had filled 2 small suitcases with the essential items I'd come for. Tom emerged from his home office as I prepared to leave, watching silently as I maneuvered toward the door. The Burlington project is important, Rebecca, he said suddenly. More important than you realize. If it fails, it could take down the whole company. I turned to face him, studying his expression. Was this a genuine concern or another manipulation? Then we'll work out terms that protect both the project and my interests at Thursday's meeting. He nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. Thursday, then. As the driver helped me into the accessible van, I looked back at our house. My dream home, my design showcase, my prison, my past. Tom stood in the doorway, a solitary figure framed by the architecture I had chosen, watching me leave for what felt increasingly like the last time. The ride back to Olivia's passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. I found myself mentally replaying our conversation, analyzing Tom's reactions, searching for clues about the missing jewelry, about his true intentions, about whether anything remained worth salvaging. Olivia was waiting when I arrived, helping me inside with my suitcases. How was it? She asked gently. Illuminating, I replied, settling into the sofa as she brought me a glass of water. Tom came home while I was there. Her eyebrows shot up. Accidentally or on purpose? I'm not sure, I admitted. But we talked, really talked, for the first time since that night. And? She prompted, perching on the arm of the sofa. I sighed, trying to organize my thoughts. Some of my things are missing, valuable things, sentimental things. Tom claimed ignorance, but something felt off about his reaction. Do you think he sold them? Olivia asked, concern etching her. Features. I don't know, I said honestly. But it's not the only strange thing. He said something about the Burlington project being more important than I realize, that if it fails, it could take down the whole company. Olivia frowned. That doesn't make sense. From everything you've told me, his company is financially solid. One project shouldn't have the power to destroy it, no matter how large. Her observation mirrored my own uneasiness. Exactly. Unless there's something he's not telling me, financial problems I'm unaware of, or commitments he's made that put everything at risk. Do you think he's in trouble? She asked. I considered the question carefully. Maybe. His reaction when I mentioned the missing jewelry was strange, almost guilty, and he seemed unusually anxious about the meeting with lawyers on Thursday. Financial desperation would explain a lot, Olivia mused. The push to get you to sign those documents, the missing valuables, even his emotional distance. But not calling me a burden, I pointed out quietly. That came from somewhere deeper. She squeezed my shoulder sympathetically. What's your next move? Information, I said firmly. Before Thursday's meeting, I need to understand exactly what's happening with Tom's business, with our joint finances, with everything. Olivia smiled approvingly. Detective mode activated. How can I help? I thought for a moment. Do you still have that contact at Lakeside National Bank? The one who helped with your renovation loan? Michael? Of course. Why? Tom and I have joint accounts there, and his business accounts are there too. I'm still a signatory on most of them, but I haven't actively monitored them in years. I'd like to understand our current financial position before Thursday. Olivia's eyes widened. I'll call Michael right away. He can probably arrange a private consultation tomorrow if I explain it's urgent. While Olivia made the call, I unpacked the suitcases, carefully arranging my rescued belongings in the studio. Each item carried memories, some joyful, some newly painful in light of recent revelations. As I worked, I compiled a mental list of questions for Thursday's meeting, determined to leave no stone unturned. The next day brought another piece of the puzzle. Michael, Olivia's banking contact, met us in a private conference room at Lakeside National Bank. Professional and discreet, he reviewed my accounts without commentary on the personal circumstances that had brought me there. Mrs. Williams, I can confirm that you have access to these joint accounts and investment portfolios, he explained, passing me printed statements. However, there have been some significant changes in activity over the past 3 months. I scanned the documents, my designer's eye for detail catching the anomalies immediately: large withdrawals, unusual transfers, a pattern of moving money that made little business sense to my untrained eye. Can you explain what I'm seeing here? I asked, pointing to a particularly large transfer from our joint savings to Tom's business account. Michael hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Without speculating on intentions, what I can say is that there's been a significant redistribution of assets recently. Funds that were previously in diverse investments have been consolidated and directed primarily toward Williams' development. Is this normal business practice? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. It depends on the business need, Michael replied diplomatically. Large development projects often require substantial capital influx at certain stages. I nodded, continuing to review the statements. And these smaller withdrawals? They're all in cash. Michael's expression remained professionally neutral. Yes, those are in-person cash withdrawals made over the past 6 weeks. The timing aligned perfectly. Beginning shortly after my accident, accelerating during my hospital stay, and continuing during my time at Olivia's. The pattern was clear, though the motivation remained murky. Thank you, Michael, I said, gathering the statements. This has been extremely helpful. As Olivia drove me back to the studio, I maintained a thoughtful silence, processing what I'd learned. It doesn't look good, does it? She finally asked as we turned onto her street. No, I admitted. Something is definitely wrong with Tom's finances. The Burlington project may be legitimate, but the way he's moving money around suggests desperation, not normal business operations. And the cash withdrawals? She pressed. I shook my head, troubled by the implications. I don't know, could be anything from gambling debts to a mistress to preparing a contingency fund if things go south. What will you do with this information? Take it to Thursday's meeting, I said firmly. Daniel and Marjorie need to see these statements. Whatever's happening with Tom's business, I need to protect myself from the fallout. Back at the studio, I called Daniel Cooper to brief him on my findings, then emailed scanned copies of the bank statements. His response was immediate and grave. Rebecca, these transactions raise serious concerns, he said, his typically measured tone tinged with urgency. I strongly recommend we add a forensic accountant to Thursday's meeting. With your permission, I'd like to bring in someone I trust implicitly. Do it, I agreed without hesitation. Whatever it costs, I need to understand what I'm facing. After ending the call, I sat in silence, staring out at Olivia's garden. The beautiful flowers and carefully tended paths seemed at odds with the ugliness I was uncovering. 15 years of marriage, and I had never truly known the man I'd shared my life with. The thought brought not just sadness, but a creeping sense of determination. Thursday would bring confrontation, of Tom, of financial realities, of the remains of our marriage. But it would also bring clarity. And with clarity, I could finally begin to rebuild on solid ground, not the shifting sands of deception and conditional love. That evening, as I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text message from Tom. "Found your mother's earrings. They were in the safe. Must have moved them for safekeeping during your hospital stay and forgotten. We'll bring them Thursday." I stared at the message, doubt gnawing at me. Why would he move just those earrings? And why to the safe we both had access to? The explanation felt convenient, manufactured. I didn't respond to the text. Thursday would reveal whether Tom was capable of truth or whether deception had become his default language. Either way, I would be prepared. Thursday morning dawned, with an unseasonable chill, matching my internal state as I prepared for the meeting that felt increasingly like a turning point. I chose my outfit with deliberate care. A tailored navy blazer over a silk blouse, paired with comfortable pants, that accommodated my back brace while still looking professional. Olivia helped style my hair, and for the first time since the accident, I applied makeup with precision, determined to project strength rather than vulnerability. "You look ready for battle," Olivia observed, stepping back to assess the final effect. "That's exactly what this is," I replied, adjusting my blazer in the mirror. "A battle for my future." The meeting was scheduled for Daniel Cooper's office, neutral ground that nevertheless gave me a home field advantage. Daniel had arranged for Marjorie Winters to join us, along with Eleanor Patel, the forensic accountant he trusted. My team would outnumber Tom's, a deliberate strategy to offset any power imbalance. Jen arrived to drive me, whistling appreciatively as she helped me into her car. "Look at you, power dressing like the old days." "Not like the old days," I corrected her. "Better than the old days. The old Rebecca dressed to compliment Tom. This version dresses for herself." The subtle distinction seemed to please her. "Well, the new Rebecca looks formidable. How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted, "but clear. For the first time in months, maybe years, I know exactly what I want from this situation." "Which is?" I stared through the windshield at the passing scenery, articulating what had been crystallizing in my mind since discovering the financial discrepancies. The truth. Protection from whatever financial mess Tom has created, and control over my own life going forward, whether that includes him or not. Jen nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Whatever happens in there today, you're facing it head-on instead of burying your head in the sand." "No more sand," I agreed softly. "I've had enough of not seeing clearly." Daniel greeted us in the lobby of his office building, his usual, professional demeanor tinged with unusual warmth. "Rebecca, you look well." "Thank you," I replied, feeling calm despite the circumstances. "Are the others here?" "Marjorie and Eleanor are waiting in the conference room. Tom and his attorney arrived about 5 minutes ago." Daniel's expression revealed nothing about that initial encounter. "His attorney?" I echoed, surprised. "Singular. I expected him to bring a team." Daniel's mouth twitched slightly. "He brought Gregory Pierce." I recognized the name immediately. Gregory Pierce was known throughout Lakeside Heights as a shark, aggressive, expensive, and typically representing high-net-worth clients in contentious divorces. That Tom had retained him sent a clear message about his expectations for this meeting. "Interesting choice," I commented neutrally as we moved toward the elevators. "Indeed," Daniel agreed, though perhaps not surprising given the circumstances. As the elevator doors closed, Jen squeezed my shoulder supportively. I'll be in the waiting area if you need me. Thank you, I said, grateful for her presence even if she wouldn't be in the actual meeting. The conference room was arranged with deliberate formality, a long mahogany table with chairs on either side, water pitchers and glasses at regular intervals, notepads and pens precisely aligned. Tom sat on one side with Gregory Pierce, both in dark suits projecting corporate confidence. Tom's eyes tracked me as I entered, his expression unreadable. On my side sat Marjorie Winters, a striking woman in her 50s, whose reputation for ruthless competence was well earned, and Eleanor Patel, whose deceptively mild appearance masked one of the sharpest financial minds in Michigan. Daniel guided my wheelchair to join them, positioning me directly across from Tom. "Shall we begin?" Daniel suggested after brief introductions were completed. Gregory Pierce leaned forward, his expression conveying practiced concern. "Before we start, I think it's important to establish the purpose of this meeting. My client understands that his wife has concerns about certain financial arrangements, which he's happy to address. However, he wants to be clear that he views this as a temporary situation brought on by medical stress, not the beginning of divorce proceedings." I watched Tom's face as his attorney spoke, noting the subtle tension around his eyes. The statement was clearly meant to establish a narrative. Poor Rebecca, confused and emotional after her accident, misinterpreting her husband's actions. Marjorie Winters smiled thinly. "How thoughtful of Mr. Williams to diagnose my client's mental state. Perhaps we should begin by allowing Mrs. Williams to express her concerns directly, rather than having them characterized by others." The subtle rebuke set the tone for what followed. With my permission, Daniel took the lead, outlining the issues. We wished to address the Burlington project financing, the unusual account activity, and the broader question of my financial security given my medical condition. My client has brought documentation showing concerning patterns of asset movement over the past several months, Daniel explained, distributing folders containing the bank statements I had obtained. We're seeking clarity about these transactions and assurances that Mrs. Williams's financial interests are being protected. Gregory Pierce barely glanced at the documents before responding. My client has full authority to manage their joint assets for business purposes. Mrs. Williams has never objected to similar transactions in the past. Similar in nature, perhaps, but not in scale or timing, Eleanor Patel interjected, speaking for the first time. Her voice was soft but penetrating. These movements represent a significant deviation from the Williams' typical financial patterns. Over the past 5 years, Tom shifted in his seat, his first sign of discomfort. The Burlington project is different from anything we've done before. It requires different financial management. Eleanor nodded as if considering this explanation. Perhaps you could elaborate on the specific requirements that necessitated withdrawing $175,000 in cash over a 6-week period. The question hung in the air, precisely targeted. Tom's face flushed slightly. "Business expenses that required cash payments?" he responded tersely. "What kind of legitimate business expenses require that much cash?" Marjorie Winters asked, her tone conversational, but her eyes sharp. "Especially when your company's accounting shows no record of these cash transactions being logged?" Tom's head snapped up. "You've accessed my company's accounting records?" "Your wife is a signatory on the business accounts," Daniel reminded him calmly. "She has every legal right to review those records, especially when they involve joint, marital assets." Gregory Pierce leaned in to whisper something to Tom, whose expression darkened further. The attorney then addressed the room. "We seem to have moved beyond simple clarification into something more adversarial. If Mrs. Williams is implying financial impropriety, we should be clear about those accusations." "No accusations," I said, speaking up for the first time. "Just questions that deserve straightforward answers. Tom, why have you been withdrawing such large amounts of cash?" And why did you attempt to restructure our assets in a way that would have effectively frozen my access to them? Tom met my gaze directly, something shifting in his expression. The Burlington project is in trouble, Rebecca. The initial investors pulled out last month. I've been scrambling to find replacements and keep the project alive. The cash was for consultation fees with people who can help save it. Consultation fees, Eleanor echoed skeptically. That's an unusual way to describe such payments. Tom's jaw tightened. The development world isn't always as clean and transparent as we might like. Sometimes securing necessary approvals requires flexibility. The implication was clear. Tom was admitting to bribery, thinly veiled as consultation fees. The revelation sent a chill through me. And the missing items from our home? I asked quietly. My mother's earrings that mysteriously appeared in the safe? The other valuables that haven't yet been found? Tom had the grace to look uncomfortable. I needed collateral for a short-term loan. The earrings were never in danger. I kept them. In the safe. The other items will be returned as soon as the situation stabilizes. The admission stunned me despite my suspicions. You pawned my belongings without my knowledge or consent? I did what was necessary to save our financial future, Tom replied, an edge of defensiveness entering his voice. The Burlington project isn't just another development, it's everything. If it fails, we lose everything. The company, the house, our reputation. Gregory Pierce looked as surprised as I felt by Tom's candor. This clearly wasn't part of their strategy. The attorney placed a restraining hand on Tom's arm, but Tom shook it off. She deserves the truth, Tom said, his voice tight. I've been trying to handle this on my own, to shield her from the mess, but obviously that's not working anymore. Perhaps, Daniel suggested carefully, Mr. Williams could explain exactly what led to this precarious financial position. A company that was reportedly thriving just months ago doesn't typically face ruin over one project. Tom exhaled slowly, defeat evident in his posture. It wasn't just one project. The company has been overextended for nearly 2 years. I took risks, leveraged assets I shouldn't have. When the market softened last fall, we started taking hits. I kept thinking I could turn it around with the next deal, the next project. As Tom continued explaining, the full picture emerged. A house of cards built on increasingly desperate financial maneuvers, with the Burlington project representing his last hope for salvation. Throughout his explanation, I felt strangely calm, as if watching a movie about someone else's life unraveling. So the documents you wanted me to sign? I prompted when he paused. Tom met my eyes, genuine regret visible for the first time. Would have separated your assets from mine, protecting you if everything collapsed. But they also would have given me access to your protected investments, money I desperately needed to keep things afloat. You were trying to protect me by using my money to prop up your failing business? I clarified, unable to keep the incredulity from my voice. It sounds terrible when you put it like that, Tom admitted. But yes, essentially. Gregory Pierce looked increasingly uncomfortable as his client abandoned any pretense of innocence. Tom, perhaps we should take a brief recess to discuss strategy. Tom ignored him, his attention focused entirely on me. I never meant to hurt you, Rebecca. When I said those things after your surgery, I was drowning in stress and fear. The accident couldn't have happened at a worse time financially, and I just broke. The admission should have softened something in me, but instead it crystallized my resolve. You broke our trust, Tom. Not just with those cruel words, but with every decision you made afterward, hiding financial problems, pawning my belongings, attempting to manipulate me into signing away my financial security. I was trying to save us, he insisted. No, I countered quietly. You were trying to save yourself. A heavy silence fell over the conference room. Even Gregory Pierce seemed at a loss for how to proceed given Tom's unexpected confessions. Daniel eventually broke the tension. Given what we've learned, I suggest we discuss concrete next steps. Mrs. Williams's primary concern is securing her financial future and protecting her from any potential fallout from Mr. Williams's business difficulties. The next 2 hours consisted of detailed negotiations, what assets could be separated immediately, how to protect my business from Tom's creditors, and preliminary discussions about a potential separation agreement. Gregory Pierce, recovering. His professional demeanor advocated fiercely for Tom's interests despite the weakened position, while my team methodically constructed protections around what remained of my financial security. By the meeting's end, we had a framework agreement. My design business would be legally insulated from Tom's financial troubles. Certain investment accounts would be moved solely into my name. Tom would return all personal items used as collateral, and we would continue living separately while deciding the ultimate fate of our marriage. As the attorneys finalized the details, Tom asked if we could speak privately for a moment. After a hesitant glance at Marjorie, who nodded her permission, I agreed. We moved to a small adjoining office, Tom pulling a chair to sit facing my wheelchair, our knees almost touching in the confined space. "I know I've handled everything wrong," he began, his voice low and serious. "The business problems, your accident, all of it. But I need you to know that despite what I said that night, I never stopped loving you." I studied his face, searching for the man I had once adored beyond reason. He was still there, somewhere beneath the deception and desperation, but the connection between us had been irrevocably altered. "The problem, Tom, is that your love comes with conditions," I said gently. "When things were good, when I was healthy and contributing and making your life easier, loving me was simple. But the moment I needed more than I could give, I became disposable." "That's not true," he protested. "I'm here, aren't I? Fighting for us?" "You're fighting for financial survival," I corrected him. "There's a difference." He leaned forward, taking my hands in his, the first time he had touched me with genuine tenderness since before the accident. "Rebecca, I know I don't deserve another chance, but we built something special over 15 years. Can we at least try to salvage it?" I didn't immediately pull my hands away, allowing myself to feel the familiar contours of his fingers against mine. "I don't know, Tom. Too much has happened." "Will you think about it?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his expression. "Not an immediate decision, just consideration." After a thoughtful pause, I nodded. "I can think about it, but right now, I need to focus on healing, physically and emotionally, and that means maintaining the separation we've established." Relief flickered across his features. "Thank you. That's all I'm asking for now." As we rejoined the others, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not happiness exactly, but the unburdening that comes with truth finally exposed to daylight. Whatever came next, reconciliation, or divorce, at least it would be based on reality rather than illusion. Leaving the conference room, I found Jen waiting anxiously in the reception area. "How did it go?" she asked, studying my expression for clues. "Surprisingly productive," I replied as she helped maneuver my wheelchair toward the elevators. "Tom admitted everything. The financial problems, the pawned items, all of it." Her eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? Just laid it all out there?" Once he started, he couldn't seem to stop. It was almost cathartic for him, I think. In the elevator, Jen asked the question I had been expecting. "So what happens now, with the two of you?" I sighed, leaning back in my wheelchair. "Honestly, I don't know. We've agreed to maintain the separation while securing my financial interests. Beyond that, it's complicated." "He really did a number on you," Jen observed, not unkindly, "both emotionally and financially." "Yes," I acknowledged, "but in a strange way, This meeting gave me something I've been missing: clarity. I finally understand what I'm dealing with. As we exited the building, the afternoon sun broke through clouds, casting long shadows across the parking lot. It felt symbolic somehow: light and shadow, truth and deception, past and future, all coexisting in the same moment. Back at Olivia's studio, I recounted the meeting's revelations to her over a glass of wine. Her expressions ranged from outrage to vindication as I detailed Tom's financial misdeeds and desperate attempts to save his failing company. "So, he pawned your mother's earrings," she said incredulously. "The ones he gave you at your wedding." "Among other things," I confirmed. "Family heirlooms, artwork, even some of my design awards. Anything with monetary value that wouldn't be immediately missed." Olivia shook her head in disbelief. "And you're actually considering giving him another chance?" "I said I'd think about it," I clarified. "That's different from actively considering it." She studied me skeptically. "Is it, though? The old Rebecca would have already been planning how to help him out of this mess, sacrificing herself for his benefit." Her observation struck uncomfortably close to home. Would I have done exactly that before the accident? Rushed to rescue Tom, regardless of how he had hurt me? "I'm not the old Rebecca anymore," I said firmly. "Whatever decision I make will be based on what's best for me, not what's best for Tom, or our image, or anyone else." Olivia raised her glass in approval. "Now that's progress I can toast to." That evening, as promised, Tom delivered a small velvet box containing my mother's pearl earrings, along with a handwritten inventory of the other items he had used as collateral and a timeline for their return. He didn't ask to come inside, respecting the boundaries we had established, but his eyes lingered on me with a mixture of regret and hope that tugged at something deep within me. After he left, I opened the box, examining the earrings that had once symbolized continuity and tradition, my mother's treasured possession, passed to me on my wedding day. They were unchanged, perfectly preserved despite their temporary pawnshop purgatory. I, however, had been transformed completely in the interim. The next morning brought an unexpected development. As I scrolled through local news over breakfast, a headline caught my eye. "Prominent developer Thomas Williams faces investigation for alleged permit bribery." The article detailed anonymous allegations that Tom had paid cash bribes to expedite approvals for the Burlington project, exactly what he had obliquely admitted to during our meeting. My phone rang almost immediately. Tom's name flashed on the screen. "Did you see it?" he asked without preamble when I answered. "The article?" "Yes. Just now," I replied, trying to process this new complication. "What happened?" "Someone talked," he said, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Probably someone at the permit office got nervous after taking the money. My attorney says the investigation is preliminary, but if it moves forward..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. If formally charged and convicted of bribery, Tom could face significant legal consequences beyond just financial ruin. "What do you need from me?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. There was a brief pause before he responded. "Nothing. I created this mess. I'll handle it. I just wanted you to hear it from me before people start calling you." The consideration was unexpected. "Thank you for that. Are you okay?" "Not really," he admitted with a humorless laugh. "But that's not your problem anymore." After we hung up, I sat motionless, staring at my phone. Despite everything Tom had done, I couldn't help feeling a twinge of sympathy for his current predicament. Not enough to rush to his rescue, but enough to acknowledge the human pain behind the headlines that would soon be circulating throughout Lakeside Heights. Olivia found me still sitting there minutes later. "Everything all right?" I showed her the article silently. She whistled low as she read. "Well, that escalated quickly. Think it was someone from your legal team?" "No," I said firmly. "Daniel and Marjorie would never breach confidentiality like that. More likely, someone at the permit office got nervous after our meeting. Government employees tend to talk when they think investigations might be coming. How do you feel about it? She asked carefully. Tom potentially facing criminal charges? I considered the question, examining my emotions with the same analytical eye I'd bring to a complex design problem. Conflicted, I finally answered. He made terrible choices that hurt me deeply. But seeing him publicly humiliated and possibly imprisoned doesn't feel like justice. It just feels sad. Olivia nodded thoughtfully. Compassion doesn't mean you have to go back to him. I know, I acknowledged. It just means I haven't lost my humanity, despite his best efforts. By mid-afternoon, the story had expanded across local media. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, business associates, and even clients expressing concern or seeking gossip disguised as support. I responded selectively, offering minimal information and deflecting intrusive questions. Vanessa called from our design studio, her voice laced with professional concern. The phone's been ringing off the hook with people trying to figure out if you're connected to Tom's troubles. How do you want me to handle it? Simple truth, I instructed her. I'm recovering from my injury, focusing on my health and our business, and have no comment on investigations involving William's development. Perfect, she approved. Professional distance without throwing him under the bus. Speaking of the business, this might actually be a good time to announce our restructuring plan. It positions you as moving forward independently, focused on innovation rather than drama. The suggestion was strategically sound. While Tom faced public scrutiny for his misdeeds, I could be reintroducing myself to the business community on my own terms. Not as a victim, not as an invalid, but as a professional adapting creatively to new circumstances. Let's do it, I decided. Draft the announcement and we'll review it tomorrow during our video call. After ending the call with Vanessa, I found myself drawn to the window overlooking Olivia's garden. The carefully tended plants and winding paths represented exactly what I was attempting in my own life, cultivating beauty and order from chaos, creating pathways through difficult terrain. My reflective moment was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Foster for my scheduled home evaluation. As she examined my progress, testing reflexes and mobility, her professional demeanor seemed slightly strained. I imagine you've seen the news, I ventured as she made notes on her tablet. She glanced up, expression carefully neutral. I make it a policy not to discuss patients' personal lives. I appreciate that, I said sincerely, but I also want to apologize for any awkwardness my situation may have caused you. Tom shouldn't have involved you in discussions about my care, without my knowledge. Her professional mask softened slightly. Your husband seemed genuinely concerned about creating an appropriate environment for your recovery. But, she added with meaningful emphasis, I should have insisted on speaking with you directly. Well, we're talking directly now, I said, with a small smile. So tell me honestly, how am I doing? Dr. Foster set aside her tablet, meeting my gaze with refreshing candor. Physically, you're making excellent progress. Your surgical site is healing well, nerve function is returning on schedule, and your muscle tone is improving with therapy. But, I prompted, sensing her hesitation. But recovery isn't just physical, she continued carefully. The emotional and psychological aspects are equally important. Recent events must be creating significant stress, which can impede healing. I nodded, appreciating her holistic perspective. The stress is real, I acknowledged. But strangely, I feel more centered now than I have in months. There's clarity in finally seeing the truth, even when it's painful. Dr. Foster studied me thoughtfully. That's actually a very healthy response. Many patients struggle most with uncertainty and loss of control. You seem to be reclaiming both. I'm trying, I admitted. Some days are better than others. As she prepared to leave, Dr. Foster paused at the door. Rebecca, as your doctor, my primary concern is your well-being. Whatever decisions you make about your marriage or living situation, make them based on what supports your health, physical and emotional. Her words stayed with me long after she departed, resonating with the new principles I was establishing for my life: health, truth, independence, self-respect. These would be my guideposts moving forward, regardless of what happened with Tom or his legal troubles. That evening, Jen arrived with dinner and news gleaned from her connections in Lakeside Heights business community. Tom's damage control is in full swing, she reported as we ate. He's hired a crisis management firm, and they're pushing the narrative that he's a victim of harassment by corrupt officials who demanded payments he felt pressured to make. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Is anyone buying that? Some are, she shrugged. Others are enjoying watching him squirm. The country club crowd is particularly divided, half supporting him as one of their own, half distancing themselves faster than rats from a sinking ship. The description painted a vivid picture of the social dynamics I had once navigated so carefully as Tom's wife. The charity committees, the fundraising galas, the careful cultivation of connections that benefited both our businesses. All of it now potentially tainted by association with scandal. Has anyone reached out to you directly? I asked. About me, I mean. Jen nodded, her expression turning protective. A few people have tried fishing for information. I've been politely uninformative. Thank you, I said gratefully. It's strange to think about that world now. The social obligations, the constant awareness of appearance and perception. It all seems so artificial from this distance. You never really fit that mold anyway, Jen observed. You were playing a part. Tom's perfect wife, the talented designer who made his properties shine, the gracious hostess, but it was never really you. Her assessment surprised me. You never said anything. Would you have listened? She asked gently. You were in love with Tom, with the life you thought you were building together. No one could have told you otherwise. She was right, of course. I had willingly embraced the role, interpreting any discomfort as the natural cost of success and partnership. It had taken catastrophic injury and betrayal to finally show me the hollowness beneath the perfect facade. Well, I said, reaching for my water glass, the performance is officially canceled. From now on, I'm just Rebecca, wheelchair and all. Jen smiled broadly. I'll drink to that. The following day brought another media development. A local business magazine published an in-depth article examining the Williams Development financial situation, including speculation about potential bankruptcy if the Burlington project collapsed. The piece painted Tom sympathetically as an ambitious businessman caught in a perfect storm of market downturns, overextension, and desperate measures to save his company. Reading between the lines, I recognized Tom's crisis management team at work, attempting to reshape the narrative. From corruption to tragedy, it was skillfully done, leveraging Tom's reputation as a community builder and job creator to generate public sympathy. What surprised me most was my own reaction, not anger or resentment, but a kind of detached assessment. I could analyze the strategy without being emotionally pulled into the drama, a clear sign of the healthy distance I was establishing. By mid-morning, several business associates had forwarded me the article, along with variations of, "Thinking of you during this difficult time." I responded with brief appreciation for their concern while maintaining my professional separation from Tom's affairs. Vanessa called just before noon, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "Have you seen the latest? The sympathetic profile in Business Monthly?" "Yes," I replied, assuming that was what had prompted her call. "No, not that. The feature request from Design Quarterly," she clarified. "They want to do a piece on innovative adaptations in the design industry, focusing on your new approach post-injury. It's perfect timing with our restructuring announcement." The opportunity was ideal, a chance to reintroduce myself professionally on my own terms, separate from Tom's troubles. That's fantastic, I agreed. When would they want to do it? That's the thing. They're on a tight deadline. They're asking for an interview tomorrow and photos by next week for their upcoming issue. I hesitated, mentally assessing my readiness for such public exposure. Was I prepared to be photographed in my wheelchair to discuss my injury and adaptation in a national publication? The old Rebecca would have delayed, wanting perfect recovery before facing cameras. The new Rebecca recognized the power in owning my current reality. Let's do it, I decided firmly. Schedule the interview. But make it clear, they get the professional story about business innovation, not personal details about my marriage. Vanessa's relief was audible. Already handled. I told them personal matters were completely off limits. After the call, I wheeled myself to the closet where I'd arranged the clothes I'd brought from home. What would the new, independent Rebecca wear for a professional photo shoot? Nothing from my old wardrobe felt quite right. Too much of it had been selected with Tom's preferences and our shared public image in mind. On impulse, I called a personal shopper I had worked with on design projects. Caroline, it's Rebecca. Williams. I need a wardrobe refresh for a photo shoot. Something that says professional evolution rather than tragic recovery. And yes, it needs to work with a wheelchair. Caroline, ever adaptable, didn't miss a beat. I've been hoping you'd call. I have some ideas already. When can I bring options for you to consider? We scheduled a session for that afternoon. Another step in reclaiming my identity separate from both my marriage and my injury. As I hung up, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Chin lifted, shoulders back, eyes clear and focused. The woman looking back at me wasn't defined by what she had lost, but by what she was building. My phone chimed with a text from Tom. My attorney says the investigation is moving forward. Press conference tomorrow to address allegations. Wanted you to know. The message contained no request for support, no emotional manipulation, just information, respecting my right to prepare for the public fallout. It represented a small but significant shift in our dynamic. I responded simply, "Thank you for letting me know. Take care of yourself." As I set the phone aside, I realized something important. Tom's crisis had ceased to be the central focus of my attention. While I remained compassionate about his situation, my own life, my business innovation, my physical recovery, my emotional healing, had rightfully taken priority. This was perhaps the most significant transformation of all, learning to center my own needs and aspirations rather than orbiting around Tom's. 6 months after that fateful meeting in Daniel Cooper's office, I sat in my newly renovated home office, reviewing the final proofs for Design Quarterly's follow-up feature. The first article had generated so much positive response that they'd commissioned a more in-depth piece on accessible design innovations. My coffee steamed beside my keyboard as I scrolled through images of projects our firm had completed under my new remote direction model. The photographs captured elegant spaces designed with both beauty and accessibility in mind. Wider doorways that appeared as intentional architectural statements, stylish grab bars disguised as modern fixtures, varied counter heights presented as customized workspace options. What had begun as personal necessity had evolved into a specialized design niche that was rapidly gaining attention throughout the industry. My phone buzzed with Vanessa's name on the screen. "The Henderson contract just came through," she announced without preamble when I answered. "Full fee, no negotiations, and they specifically requested your personal oversight on the project." "That's the third this month," I noted, unable to keep satisfaction from my voice. "The new business model is working better than we projected." "It's working because you turned adversity into innovation," Vanessa replied. "People respond to that story, and to the exceptional designs that have come out of it." After ending the call, I wheeled myself to the large windows overlooking the garden of my new home. Unlike the imposing colonial and Pinecrest estates, this mid-century modern ranch sat on a quiet acre at the edge of Lakeside Heights. Single-level, open concept, with doorways and hallways already generously proportioned, it had required minimal adaptation for wheelchair accessibility while offering the aesthetic appeal my designer's eye demanded. I had purchased it 3 months earlier, after Tom and I finalized our divorce. The process had been surprisingly amicable in the end, both of us too exhausted by public scrutiny and private pain to engage in protracted legal battles. With Daniel and Marjorie's guidance, we had crafted a settlement that protected my financial interests while acknowledging the complex entanglement of our business lives. Tom had avoided criminal charges for the bribery allegations through a combination of cooperation with authorities and a substantial settlement payment. His business had survived, though significantly diminished. The Burlington project abandoned, several properties sold to satisfy creditors, his reputation permanently tarnished in certain circles. We rarely spoke now, though occasionally I received brief texts updating me on the return of items he had pawned or matters related to our former shared properties. Each message maintained the respectful distance we had established, neither seeking reconciliation nor expressing lingering resentment. The divorce had generated its own minor media flurry, but my consistent refusal to publicly comment had eventually steered attention elsewhere. I had given exactly one interview addressing my personal situation to a journalist I trusted, where I simply stated, "My marriage ended for private reasons that deserve to remain private. My focus now is on my health, my business, and creating designs that make spaces accessible for everyone." That focus had proven remarkably fruitful. Williams Design Studio, renamed after the divorce, had not only survived the transition, but thrived under the new model. Our client list had actually expanded as my personal story of adaptation resonated with a broader audience seeking design solutions for various physical limitations. My physical recovery had plateaued at about 70% of my pre-accident mobility, better than the doctors had initially predicted, but still requiring the wheelchair for longer distances and the permanent accommodation of certain limitations. I had learned to see these constraints not as losses, but as design parameters, both for my living space and for my life. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Maria, my physical therapist turned friend, had arrived for our weekly session, now more focused on maintaining function than dramatic improvement. I had converted one of the bedrooms into a therapy space, equipped with the necessary tools for my ongoing exercises. "You're looking energized today," Maria observed as she helped me through a series of stretches. "Good news?" "Several pieces," I confirmed. "The Henderson contract came through. The design quarterly feature is almost finalized, and I slept through the night without pain for the 3rd time this week." Maria smiled approvingly. "That last one might be the most important. Pain disrupts everything: sleep, mood, concentration. Consistent, pain-free nights are a significant milestone." After therapy, I showered and dressed for my afternoon plans: lunch with Jen at our favorite cafe, followed by a board meeting at the Lakeside Heights Accessibility Initiative, where I had recently accepted a position as design advisor. As I applied light makeup, I studied my reflection with objective curiosity. The woman looking back at me had changed in subtle but profound ways over the past year. The physical changes were obvious: leaner from the different muscle use required. By wheelchair life, hair styled in a sleeker, more practical cut, wardrobe evolved to emphasize comfort without sacrificing style. But the more significant transformations lay beneath the surface. The constant need to please had vanished from my eyes. The reflexive smile that had once appeared regardless of my true feelings had been replaced by authentic expressions. Even my posture in the wheelchair conveyed a centered confidence that had nothing to do with standing tall in the conventional sense. At the cafe, Jen was already waiting, waving from our usual table by the window. The staff had rearranged the nearby chairs without comment when this became my regular spot. Another small kindness that had helped ease my transition to public life with a wheelchair. "You're glowing," Jen observed as I positioned myself at the table. "Therapy must have gone well." "Life is going well," I corrected her, accepting the menu from our server. "I just got confirmation that the Henderson contract came through." "The vacation complex in Traverse City? That's huge." We chatted through lunch about work developments, family news, and plans for the upcoming holiday season. Normal conversation that felt precious precisely because of its ordinariness. After so many months of crisis and adjustment, the simple pleasure of sharing a meal with my sister without drama looming over us felt like a luxury. "Have you heard from Tom recently?" Jen asked as we finished our coffee, the question casual but her eyes watchful. "Last week," I confirmed without emotional inflection. "The sale of the Pinecrest house finally closed. He transferred my portion of the proceeds and sent a brief text confirming it." Jen nodded thoughtfully. "Does it feel strange? Knowing strangers are living in the house you designed?" I considered the question, searching for any lingering attachment to the colonial that had once been the physical manifestation of my marriage. Not really, I realized. That house belonged to a different life. Beautiful, but ultimately not. Built on solid foundation. This new place feels more authentically mine. "Because you bought it independently?" "Partly," I acknowledged, "but mostly because it reflects who I am now, not who I was trying to be then." After lunch, Jen drove me to the community center for the board meeting. The Lakeside Heights Accessibility Initiative had been founded years earlier, but had gained significant momentum in recent months, partly due to my involvement. What had begun as a personal adaptation to disability had evolved into a broader advocacy for inclusive design throughout the community. The meeting room fell quiet as I entered. The board members, a diverse group including architects, city planners, disability advocates, and business leaders, turning to greet me with genuine respect. This was perhaps the most unexpected gift of my journey, discovering that vulnerability, authentically embraced, could become a source of authority rather than weakness. "Rebecca, we were just discussing the proposal for the municipal building renovation," explained Marcus Liu, the board chair. "Your input on the accessibility elements would be particularly valuable." For the next 2 hours, I was fully immersed in constructive discussion about creating spaces that welcomed everyone, regardless of physical ability. My technical expertise as a designer merged with my lived experience as a wheelchair user, allowing me to articulate nuances that might otherwise have been overlooked. As the meeting concluded, Sandra Abrams, a longtime disability rights advocate in her 70s, wheeled over to speak with me privately. "When you first joined the board, I wondered if this was just part of your personal adjustment phase," she admitted candidly. "Many newly disabled people go through a period of intense focus on accessibility issues before moving on. But you've brought something different, a designer's eye combined with genuine commitment." "Thank you," I replied, touched by her assessment. This work has become increasingly important to me. Not just because of my personal situation, but because I've seen how thoughtful design can eliminate unnecessary barriers for everyone. Sandra nodded approvingly. "That's precisely the perspective we need. Speaking of which, would you consider presenting at the Regional Urban Planning Conference next month? Your professional credentials would open doors that have been closed to advocates like me for years." I agreed without hesitation, another step in this unexpected new direction my life had taken. That evening, alone in my accessible sanctuary, I reflected on the day's events while preparing a simple dinner. My new kitchen featured counters at varying heights, allowing me to cook comfortably from the wheelchair, a simple adaptation that had restored one of my favorite activities. As I chopped vegetables for a stir-fry, my phone lit up with an incoming call from an unknown number. "Rebecca Williams," I answered, balancing the phone against my shoulder as I continued cooking. "Mrs. Williams?" This is Andrew Keller from Lakeside Memorial Hospital's Patient Advocacy Program. I set down my knife, giving the call my full attention. Yes, Mr. Keller. How can I help you? I'm calling because your name was suggested as someone who might be willing to participate in our new mentorship initiative. We're connecting recent spinal injury patients with individuals further along in their recovery journey. The request caught me by surprise. That's not something I've considered before. What exactly would it involve? Primarily sharing your experience, practical adaptation strategies, emotional coping mechanisms, professional adjustments. Many newly injured patients struggle to envision a fulfilling future. Someone like you, who has successfully rebuilt her life, could provide invaluable perspective. I hesitated, mental calendar already crowded with design projects, accessibility initiative commitments, and my ongoing therapy regimen. Yet something about the request resonated deeply. The opportunity to transform my painful experience into something constructive for others. I'd like to learn more, I decided. Could we schedule a meeting to discuss the details? After ending the call and setting a meeting for the following week, I returned to my dinner preparation with a strange sense of completion. The journey that had begun with those devastating words, "You're just a burden now," had transformed me in ways I could never have anticipated. The woman Tom had dismissed as a burden had become someone stronger, more authentic, and more impactful than before. The cruel words that once shattered my heart had ultimately freed me to rebuild a life aligned with my true values rather than external expectations. Later that evening, as I reviewed emails before bed, I noticed one from Dr. Foster with the subject line, "1-year follow-up." Opening it revealed a brief message. "Rebecca, it's been nearly a year since your surgery. While your physical therapy continues, I believe it's important to acknowledge this milestone. Many patients find the 1-year mark significant in their recovery journey. If you'd like to schedule a comprehensive evaluation, my office can arrange it at your convenience. Regardless, I wanted to express my admiration for how you've navigated this challenging year." 1 year. The realization landed with surprising weight. In some ways, it felt like a decade had passed since the accident. So much had changed. So many versions of myself shed and discovered. In other ways, the memory of that night, lying in the guest bedroom, hearing Tom's cruel assessment, remained. Vivid enough to still trigger a phantom pain beneath my breastbone. I opened my journal, a practice suggested by the therapist I had eventually consulted to process the emotional trauma of both my injury and my marriage's collapse. On a fresh page, I began writing, 1 year since the surgery. 1 year since Tom called me a burden and I changed our estate plan that night. So much lost, mobility, marriage, the life I had carefully constructed. So much gained. Authenticity, purpose, genuine connections based on who I truly am rather than who I pretended to be. If I could go back to that night, would I change anything? The pain was excruciating, both physical and emotional. The fear was overwhelming. But the clarity that emerged from that darkness has proven invaluable. Perhaps some truths can only be seen when comfortable illusions are stripped away. I am not the woman I was a year ago. I am stronger in the broken places. The wheelchair that Tom saw as a burden has become merely a tool, no more defining of my worth than my computer or design software. The limitations he couldn't accept have opened pathways to innovation I might never have discovered otherwise. Most importantly, I now understand that my value was never contingent on what I could do for others, but intrinsic to who I am. Not enhanced by standing beside a successful husband, not diminished by sitting in a wheelchair. 1 year. A complete revolution around the sun. A complete revolution of self. I closed the journal, set it aside, and wheeled myself to the bedroom. Through the large windows, stars were visible in the clear night sky. Pinpoints of light, marking vast distances, yet somehow appearing close enough to touch, like memory, like hope, like the unexplored possibilities of tomorrow. As I prepared for sleep, I recognized a profound peace that had gradually replaced the turmoil of the past year. Not the passive peace of resignation, but the active peace of alignment, of living authentically, of using painful experience as a catalyst for growth rather than a sentence to bitterness. Tom's words had indeed changed everything that night, just not in the way either of us could have possibly imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.